Welcome, everybody. We are so happy that you're here with us tonight. We are doing our last, I think, KindSoups Afghan Edition, and I am thrilled that we have Humaira Ghilzai here with us. She was a refugee once from Afghanistan, and she lives in San Francisco. She's a playwright, she's a blogger, she's a cultural consultant, and I'll let her speak more about her really important work in Afghanistan with women and girls and some of the advocacy work, tremendous advocacy work she's doing now. But I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to have my daughter Julia here with me. Julia's with Capital Area Interfaith Friends, and we have cooked many of Humaira's wonderful Afghan recipes from her blog, Afghan Culture Unveiled, for arriving refugee families over the last few years with KindWorks. So we are really happy to be cooking here today. And Humaira, thank you so much for being with us. I got to road test this recipe last night because we were delivering a meal to refugees today. And so I wanted to make sure that I could tuck it in their fridge, and it was amazing. So you're in for a big treat. Humaira is muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can, perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. It's hard to control my phone when it's so far away. So I'm in San Francisco, so it's 2:30 here, and it's good evening to you guys. I'm really excited to be here. I want to thank Dominique and Deb for inviting me. Dominique and I actually met on Facebook through a mutual friend, which I think is one of the wonderful things about social media, aside from the negative things. But I'm really excited to be here with you guys and share. It's actually, Aush is my favorite Afghan food. It's also one of the first dishes I learned. I didn't grow up really making any Afghan food or helping my mom like Dominique's daughter's doing for some reason. My mom would do all the cooking and we would do all the eating. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I felt the need that I needed to learn a few dishes. And I specifically learned Aush first because it was my favorite dish. But what happened was when I was in my 30s and I was raising my own kids, I realized that a lot of the foods that my mom makes is really delicious Afghan food that where she really just knows the recipes. My sisters and I were not really learning from her. And I realized that, you know, she's aging, and if I don't capture these recipes, it may perish with her when it's time for her to leave this earth. So that was around 12 years ago or so that I had this premonition. So I joined up with a friend who's actually a dietitian as well as a food writer. And we started following my mom around her kitchen and learning a lot of her recipes. So those are most of the recipes that are on my blog, which is called Afghan Culture Unveiled, are my mom's recipes or my sister or my aunts. Sometimes if I'm at Afghan parties, I ask around, you know, from various women who are around my mom's age, you know, what they like to cook. And then I go home and fiddle with it and get some feedback. So it's basically a conglomeration of family recipes as well as things that I have created over time. My hope with the blog was originally to preserve my mom's legacy and her beautiful food. She was an excellent cook, but it has really turned into a source of cultural information about Afghanistan. Over the years, I've written a lot about books and movies and cultural events, and most recently, with the fall of the Afghan government and the Taliban retake, all I've written about is, the politics and what's going on in Afghanistan. I have to say, the past 7 weeks or so since August 15th has been really, really challenging for all of us in the diaspora. It really has been a very traumatic experience to watch this country that we care about and the people that we feel so connected to just, lose everything. It has been very frustrating for me, both as an American, as an Afghan, and an Afghan, to see how our hasty withdrawal affected so many people. And there are a lot of Afghans that are currently still in danger. They are not able to leave the country, and they're going to have to live under the Taliban. And of course, the byproduct of that, which is something that's really close to my heart, because through my organization, Afghan Friends Network, I started schools in Afghanistan for the past 20 years. We promoted girls' education, boys' education, women's literacy, and all of that is null and void. Our schools have closed. Currently, the Afghan economy is crashing because we, the United States, are holding a lot of the country's assets, around $9.5 billion of the country's assets. So government workers are not paid their salaries, people can't withdraw their money from the banks and such. So the inflation has gone through the roof, people don't have access to money. So we're still trying to help our teachers because with the cold winter coming, people need coal and of course just the basic necessities they're not able to buy because they're not getting their salaries. And most people do not have a savings. And if they had a savings and it was in the bank, that's non-existent. So we are continuing to support our teachers and hoping that things will turn around if the international community pressures the Biden administration to release some of the funds that are actually the Afghan people's money. But we can talk more about that later if you all are interested. But like I said, Aush is one of my favorite dishes. It's basically a noodle soup, which has a meat sauce on top, and then we pour yogurt on it. And if you think about it, it's actually a very balanced meal because you get a little bit of your starch, you get lots of protein, and actually the recipe you all have, you'll be using chicken broth. I have kind of moved off of chicken broth and I just use water. But with the meat and yogurt, I just feel like it's such a great balanced meal, and it's really hearty for the winter. When my kids were little, if they had a hard day at school or whatever, they'd come home, they're like, can you make Aush today? So it's kind of become their comfort food too. Today, my husband has become a vegetarian per my daughter's influence. So what I'm doing is using plant-based meat, which is really looks and behaves like beef, which kind of freaks me out actually, how much it looks like beef. So you'll see my packaging is a little different, but it'll end up looking just like yours. Let's just start the cooking because I know we have an hour and I want to stay within that. And then we'll keep talking and hopefully at the end there will be some opportunities to catch up more. So one thing I will do, because Deb said that some of you are like very major recipe followers. Well, I am not a recipe follower. I just eyeball stuff and I throw things in. So I know you have the recipe with the measurements, but what I'm going to do is I'm not going to measure things. I'm just going to throw stuff in. And I encourage you all to start cooking that way because then you can kind of tweak recipes a little bit to your own taste. If you like a little extra salt, throw in some extra salt. If you like things with a little bit of heat, add in a little bit of chili. My husband jokes that my food never tastes the same because I'm always changing it. So if you have a pan, I suggest that you start heating it so we can start cooking the onions. What we're gonna do is cook the onions and then start cooking the kofta meat. And while that's cooking, we will start the water and move. And this is one of those recipes that you can, I think, easily throw together in a half hour for your own family. I know for a big batch of people like you guys are doing, it'll take a little longer because everything takes a little longer when you have, 3 pounds of beef as opposed to 1 pound. But you will see that I'm just cooking for me and my husband. I'm an empty nester now, so my kids are both in college, which is actually a lot of fun, people. I wouldn't worry about it too much if you have kids that are going to be going to college soon. So I'm kind of holding my hand up here. It's a little bit warm. I have my olive oil. I'm gonna just splash some olive oil. I also like oil too. So I think that our recipe called for 2 tablespoons or something. Just throw in whatever amount of oil that you had in the recipe. And then I'm gonna add the onions, which I have chopped. I mean, it's kind of roughly chopped. It doesn't have to be teeny tiny. And Dominique, if I skip a step, remind me.
I will. Lynn has a question. She bought halal ground beef, but didn't occur to her to look for halal chicken broth. So as regular, does that make it no longer halal? Which actually is a very good question that occurred to me because we've always cooked with regular chicken broth. And I'm just curious, it would be helpful for us to know going forward how.
Yeah, it wouldn't make it halal because it's for regular chicken. She can certainly just use water today. It's perfectly fine because by the time you put the beef and the yogurt, it's gonna have a lot of flavor. So she may want to add a little bit more salt to the noodles because normally I call for less salt if you're using broth because usually it has its own sodium. So,
or if you have vegetable broth, you could use that. I assume.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And what I wanted to say about your style of cooking, we always say soup in particular is very forgiving. It's not like baking where exact measurements are important. You can do it to your taste, use your instincts. And I think that's what you're encouraging us to do.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I am a terrible baker for that exact reason because I don't follow recipes or measurements. So my daughter was the baker at our house, but she's a freshman this year, so there's no baking happening in this house. But exactly, soup is very forgiving in my opinion. I mean, unless like if you put really too much salt, I just can't see you ruining many things. So that's kind of my attitude towards. And then if I do ruin something, and my husband complains, I was like, okay, then you make the next meal, and then usually he stops complaining.
So I have to say, having cooked a lot of Humaira's recipes, it's not a lot of ingredients. They're not complicated, but they pack a huge punch in terms of flavor. I remember the first time we made your beef stew and you add water and it was so flavorful. It was basically beef, onions, garlic, barely any spice, but it was like, wow. So there's, the recipes are not complicated, but they are delicious. I made the chicken lawang for my family as well as to take yesterday. And like the pot was like licked clean practically by my kids.
I'm so happy to hear that. Well, lawang is definitely one of my favorites. And that's what kind of makes me sad about my husband going vegetarian is that I don't make some of those meat dishes. This might be a good time to put your water or chicken broth in your pot and start heating it. Because liquid takes a while to heat. So especially with the amount that you all are using. So I'm just going to use water. I'll tell you the truth, I forgot to buy vegetable broth, so that's why I'm using water right now. And then don't forget to stir your onions. If it's a little high, turn it down so it doesn't get too brown too quickly. And here I have my garlic. I'm just going to throw those in too.
Humaira, I like smoked paprika. I wouldn't substitute all of it, but is it okay to add a little bit for a little bit of a smoky flavor?
Absolutely. I have my paprika sitting right here. I'll be definitely adding paprika to mine. I think there are a couple of versions of this recipe on my blog. One calls for paprika. It's probably when I wrote it, if I didn't have paprika, I didn't add it. So, but yes, absolutely. Especially if you have like smoked paprika, like Hungarian paprika, that tastes really good. So what I want you to do is gather your spices now, because what we're going to do is add the spices to the hot pot or hot saute pan. And that sort of brings out the flavors of the spices. Traditionally, like the way my mom made it, you would cook the meat first and then add the spices. But recently I've discovered if you add the spices straight to the hot saute pan, they bloom and they just smell really good. And I feel like their flavors open up. So we're gonna add our cumin. This is Afghan black cumin that that was sent to me from Rumi Spices. And I don't get paid for any of these things. I'm not plugging anything for you guys. I'm just telling you what just happened. This is coriander. I'm adding my coriander to the pot. And I'm going to add a little bit of paprika. And so we'll just kind of stir that a little bit. And I hope that your kitchen's starting to smell like cumin and coriander. And also, I wish I could zoom my camera, but I'll bring this over to you guys. Just the pot looks really beautiful, like so colorful. And it smells really good. So I'm gonna now just stir that a little bit longer. And then I'm going to add my meat. So kofta is made with ground beef. I don't know if you like turkey, you can absolutely use that. I don't know if there's halal ground turkey, to be honest with you. If you want to make it a little fancy, you can use ground lamb. But what you want to do is break the meat apart when you are cooking it. I just turned it down a tiny bit so the meat doesn't cook, doesn't get crispy. And when you do, you just break it apart and then stir it so the spices get all mixed up and goes inside the meat. And you're breaking that because it should be sort of like taco meat, all ground up together. And what's fun about kofta is that if you just make the kofta and stuff it in a pita bread and throw a bunch of salad and then a little drizzle of yogurt, it tastes super delicious. So all these things, like you can either, if it tastes really good to you, you can just serve it by itself. If you don't have the ingredients to make the Aush, you can just make kofta pockets for that. And if you like heat, you can certainly add a little bit of chili to this. What I do is when I'm serving the Aush, I put chili flakes on top of it. So I'm looking at you guys through my phone. So the only person I can really see is Dominique. So I'm not sure where everybody is in the process. Dominique, is everybody doing okay? Are they able to stay up with us?
I think everybody's doing great. Anybody have any questions? I see some thumbs up. Can I add spinach? If so, when?
Yes, I'm going to add spinach in my Aush, and I will tell you when it should be. It's literally the last step. So I got you, and I'm glad you reminded me so I can pull out my spinach. Okay, so while we're waiting for the meat to cook a little bit, I'd say let's give it 2 more minutes before we add the tomato. We will be adding garbanzo beans and kidney beans. And in Afghanistan, I mean, majority of people are very poor. So a good source of protein are legumes, and that's why our soups have legumes. Like there are families that probably will not be able to afford, I mean, families in Afghanistan, maybe the beef. So they might load up a little bit more on the chickpeas. With the chickpeas and the kidney beans, you can certainly boil your own. I think they definitely taste really good if you get dry beans and boil it yourself. But I think canned is fine too. I mean, my family had never seen cans until we came to the United States. So this was our first introduction to how easy cooking can be. So I just put my kidney beans and chickpeas in a colander and I'm rinsing it. I like to get all that yucky stuff off of it, and also it makes your soup look much better as well. Okay, so my water is boiling. I'm just going to turn it down to low. My kofta is looking really good. What I'm going to do is, if you have tomato paste, great. The tomato paste is really the key to making this delicious. Add a tiny bit of water to your tomato paste and stir it. If you don't have tomato paste, you can certainly use can of tomato sauce. But I feel like the rich flavor of tomato paste gives the meat a really nice tangy taste. So I've made it kind of creamy, and I think it's just easier to distribute if you do that. So I'm gonna add, and I'm hoping you're all adding yours too. So here we go. I added all the tomato paste. And then I'm gonna just stir it very well until all the tomato paste is really mixed in really, really well. Because tomato paste is so thick, you really want to make sure that you stir this until you can kind of see an orangey color. Okay. let's let that kind of get mixed together. Is everybody with me? Are we in the right step right now? Okay, so my water is boiling. So what I'm going to do is add the spaghetti. I just use whatever spaghetti. I mean, in general, if you use high protein spaghetti or pasta, I think it's better, especially in our case when we're always trying to find other sources of protein. I saw a question pop in. Was there a question?
So somebody asked, do we really need 30 cups of broth?
Well, what you need, so I didn't increase the recipe, so I don't know.
I'll speak to that. So
Okay.
I cooked this last night and it was very close to what was called for. I started with less because it seemed like a lot. And then when the pasta, what's delicious is if you're using some kind of broth, the pasta absorbs it. And so at first it was like, oh, okay, the less amount is perfect. And then after I let it sit for 15 minutes, there was hardly any broth because the pasta keeps absorbing it. So
Yeah,
start with less and then put in your pasta, and then you can always add more, is how I look at it.
the other thing I do is generally this is a soup you should eat right away, so the pasta doesn't. But if you have leftover and the next day there is no liquid left, just add a little extra water or broth before you warm it up, and then it's like Aush, but you definitely want it to be liquidy. This is not a noodle, it's not a dry noodle soup. It should have some good amount of liquid. So I'm adding my pasta in there. And honestly, if you want to break your pasta, I don't mind that. It's totally up to you. A quick fact is that there are archaeologists who believe that pasta or dough-based types of products came from Afghanistan. And that was kind of surprising to me because I thought it was from China, but that was exciting to hear that it is that pasta may have originated from Afghanistan. If I were to tell you what region of Afghanistan has a lot of dough-based dishes, it's the northeastern part of Afghanistan. The Uzbek region has a lot of dishes that are dough-based, so like dumplings and soups and things like that. So my phone is my timer, and I have my phone sitting up there. So I'm kind of hoping that I gauge the timing of this pasta well. But basically what we're gonna do is cook the pasta for like 5 to 6 minutes and then add the beans. In the meantime, let's check on our meat. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit more. It's looking good. You just want it to kind of like simmer and cook slowly. It should not be on high heat because then the kofta will start burning on the edges and it'll be crunchy rather than soft. I'm gonna grab the yogurt. I think I saw some instructions that you all are not going to include yogurt with your Aush, but my favorite part of Aush dish is the yogurt. So don't forget to add salt to your Aush. I think, you know what, speaking of forgetting, I think I forgot to add salt to my kofta. So I'm going to do that now. Dominique was in charge of reminding me if I forgot a step. And now I'm adding.
I'm sorry, I'm dropping the ball.
So I just added my salt and black pepper. I'm just joking.
No, I know, but you know, that's the thing about cooking. You'll taste it and you'll go, oh, I forgot the salt. So
Exactly.
again, cooking is forgiving. Trust yourself and your taste.
And to be honest with you guys, this is like full disclosure. I normally don't cook and talk at the same time. Usually I'm just cooking. So today I feel a little distracted because I feel like I need to entertain you guys while I'm cooking. So I feel like my pasta's been going for a good amount of time. Like when I stir it, the noodles sort of swirl around. But you don't want to fully cook it because you do want to add the beans. Okay. I've added all my beans. So just to give you an idea on water, right now I would say there's at least an inch or inch and a half of liquid above my noodles. So, and that's a good amount that it should be. So I'm just gonna let this boil until the pasta is ready. You all just keep an eye on when your pasta feels like it's gonna be ready. You don't wanna overcook it, you don't want mushy. So now I kind of feel like my kofta has definitely cooked and picked up all the flavors and such. So I've really turned it down to low. And then as far as the spinach question, I feel adding spinach or kale is a really great idea. If you are adding kale, I would say add it at the last minute of cooking of your pasta for spinach, because spinach doesn't really need a lot of cooking. We'll just throw it in like the last 30 seconds, give it a swirl. And because I personally don't like super wilted spinach, but if you wanted to cook a little longer, you're welcome to put it in a little earlier. So while we're waiting, I'm gonna start preparing the assembly part of this dish. If you're not sure if your pasta is ready, I still feel like mine needs at least 2 more minutes before I taste it for readiness. Dominique, how's it going with you guys over there?
I'm good. My meat sauce seems almost done. Because it's such a big quantity, I'm just letting it cook to make sure it's totally cooked before I taste it, but it smells amazing. And I just put my beans into the pasta water. My pasta definitely still needs maybe 4 minutes more, maybe 5.
Okay.
But everything seems about ready. I've got my spinach ready to go. So I think we're running well. You're on time. Anything you want to share with us about, the work that you're doing now or anything like that? Or if there's any instructions, or how are other people doing? Maybe tell us a little bit about your story and your family, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, well, what I'm thinking is, since my pot is just like a couple of seconds ahead of yours, why don't I pay attention to that before I launch into a story? Because as Afghans, we sort of do a lot of stories. But I just like quick food related things that I thought might be fun to know is that in Afghanistan, most people eat seasonally because it's agricultural country. people eat fruit that's within the season. So they'd be eating apples and pomegranates right now. So even our food is like we have winter dishes and summer dishes. Like most people will eat like the Aush in the fall time, even in the winter. But because it has yogurt, which is kind of cooling, maybe not too much in the winter. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I feel like we don't think about so much because our groceries are filled with fruits and vegetable all year round. But definitely, I think people's constitution is used to that seasonal type of cooking. So, you know, squash and shola, which is a risotto dish, things like that are usually cooked in the winter, things that warm you from the inside. So if you're getting too many foamy stuff, feel free to remove it. I think it just makes the pasta look nice. So I feel like my noodles are ready for the spinach. Yeah. So I'm just throwing in a random handful, maybe 3 or 4 handfuls of spinach. This is one of those things that you cannot make a mistake about. If you decide you want more, you certainly can put more spinach, especially since spinach sort of melts anyway. So here we go.
We have a question. Since this dish is served in 2 parts, how best to package it for donation? I did donate some, and so I tested this last night. I put the soup with the pasta and the beans, and then I added a little bit of more liquid because I felt like the pasta has absorbed a lot. And then I put the meat on top of that, and I sprinkled it with mint. And then the yogurt is separate so that they could heat it and, you know, put it together tonight when they arrived.
That sounds perfect. I mean, that's probably what I would do too, is combine those two
really
parts.
Pretty, the layers, and I had spinach in mine too, and it looked pretty. And Olivier said I tasted it and it tastes delicious.
Good.
And I tasted mine too, and I agree.
Okay, so I'm going to show you guys. It's a very beautiful dish. So this is what my Aush bowl looks like. You can see there's a nice balance of everything. I used water, so it's more clear, but certainly the one with the soup, with the chicken broth is going to be equally delicious. And so let's say if you're entertaining an Afghan at your house, you would just ladle. Since I'm not going to eat this right now, I'm not putting a lot in here, but just for demonstration purposes, I first added the Aush there, and then I've added the kofta on top of it. Can you see this?
Tilt it a little bit more towards us. There we go.
And the next step is to put a dollop of yogurt. Now, this is totally up to your taste. I love yogurt, so I put way more yogurt than everybody else in my family on my Aush, but it's totally up to you. Now I'm sprinkling some mint and a little bit of the pepper. So Are you able to see this?
Yes, it looks delicious. So you have broth, but there is actually quite a bit of meat on top.
Yes. Yeah. I like a lot of meat.
Yeah. Or a lot of meat in your case, quotes.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so there's, I mean, you can definitely see the broth. It's just like right above the noodles, and then a good amount of meat. Because at the end of the day, I'll show you that, I mean, I produced this much meat. It was 1 pound of plant-based.
Right.
So if you were to serve this for,
Humaira, we lost your picture. I'm not sure why.
I'm getting a phone call.
Ah, there you go.
Okay.
There we go.
So I will just bring this right there. So if you're, let's say, serving 6 people, and you separate the meat that way. And then what I do is stir this. And voila, you have Aush. I like to sprinkle dry dill on it too. So this is what it will look like when you eat it.
Yum.
All nice and stirred together. Okay.
This is what my packages looked like. I don't know if anybody can see.
Oh yeah, that looks
It's
great.
really pretty and cheerful looking.
Yes, absolutely. This is delicious. Well, when I make my videos, a lot of times I don't try my food, and my viewers are complaining as to why I don't eat my own food. I'm like, because it's so weird to be eating your own food while everybody else is watching you. So I decided to eat a little bit today.
We had another question. Did you add the spinach to the meat or to the noodles to cook it?
To the noodles.
And then Olivia said we're vegetarian. Instead of using artificial meat, we used green jackfruit, and we're not using yogurt because we're out. We cook the jackfruit in the soup broth. And Olivia, how is it?
It's very good. I'm gonna take another spoonful now since it's so good, and I'm gonna have this for dinner. That's what it looks like.
Oh, gorgeous.
Oh, goodness, that looks amazing. Well done.
Thank you.
Olivia, if you want, you can also use tofu and just chop the tofu up, and then next time you make this, if you don't have jackfruit and you have tofu, you can certainly cook your tofu the same exact way that I cooked the kofta meat. And it turns out really delicious.
That's a good idea. I think we'll do it.
Yeah. So you cooked all that all by yourself, or do you have an assistant?
Well, my mom is helping me.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is she a good helper?
Hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. We're sometimes I'm his sous chef and sometimes he's my sous chef.
Okay. Well, I guess you both have to be good in supporting each other.
Right.
So let me answer Dominique's question about my work. So I'm one of those people that does a variety of different things. I write about Afghan food and culture on my blog, Afghan Culture Unveiled, which was shared with you all. I also work as a cultural advisor with productions, whether it's like theater or film or television, if they're doing any kind of work around Afghanistan. This week I'll be working with a playwright who has written a play with Afghan character, and she herself is not Afghan. So she wanted me to read her play for cultural authenticity. I've edited books where it was written by a non-Afghan and they wanted me to do it for cultural authenticity. I've recently written a play myself, or actually act one of a play, which we had a workshop for this weekend. But one of my passions in the past 18 years has been educating girls, women, and boys in Afghanistan. And that I've done through my nonprofit called Afghan Friends Network. The website is afghanfriends.net. We worked in the province of Ghazni, which is around 100 kilometers from Kabul. And we had schools for boys and girls. Unfortunately, our schools have closed, or they have not been reopened because the Taliban mandate that girls are not allowed to go to school right now for security reasons. The boys are going back to school, and also women who are teachers are not allowed to go and teach. So that's a very difficult setback for us in my organization and my colleagues, because we really saw all these Afghan girls and women work so hard to embrace the opportunities to go to school, to go to university, and all of that has been literally taken away from them overnight. And then as far as my advocacy work here in the US has been since the Taliban took over, to really educate people about what the Afghans are going through. I mean, at the beginning, there was, Afghanistan was in the news quite a bit, but now Afghanistan has sort of lost its cachet and is no longer in the news, which really makes me very sad because the country's still in turmoil. We just don't know about it. So out of over 35 million Afghans, maybe 100 or 200,000 are able to leave, potentially to go to other countries or the US. But majority of the country is going to be under the rule of the Taliban. The refugees you all are feeding and welcoming to your communities are Afghans who have somehow helped the US mission. And by that, I mean the US war, the US's objectives to do whatever set out to do with the US government in the 21-year occupation of the country. So these people who are coming to your communities are allies. They've put themselves and their families at risk to help the US government, US military, US nonprofits to bring civil society to Afghanistan. As you can imagine, a lot of the people who are immigrating here have been through years of war. The end of the US occupation was very traumatic. So there's probably a lot of trauma and mental health issues that is plaguing these families. And I think that we really need to understand how PTSD can manifest. Like even for me, I came here when I was 11 years old, and I've pretty much grown up in the United States. But when the country, fell apart, and we were seeing all those images of Afghans running at the airport, or when I was talking to my colleagues, I really had all those feelings of entrapment, hopelessness, feeling that there aren't many ways that I can function in the world come back to me. And I have to say, I was really surprised. I didn't know I was harboring so much trauma in my body. And that is for somebody who has grown up here, and I've had all the comforts of living in the United States. I can just imagine that that's multiplied by thousands when it comes to Afghans who have lived in Afghanistan and then had to leave the country in such difficult ways. So I don't want to, go on and on too much. I'd like to let you all ask me questions, whether it's about Afghan food, culture, people, immigrants. I'm more than happy to answer them. I do have a YouTube video, YouTube channel. And one of the videos that I highly encourage you to watch, if you're able to, is called 100-Year History of Afghan Women. And basically, I go through 100-year history of Afghanistan and how all the regime changes have affected the Afghan women. So I feel like it's a very quick and approachable way to learn about Afghanistan's history and Afghan women. And I have a series of food videos there. Especially, I have this delicious rice cookie, which is gluten-free, and also almond brittle, which would make really delicious holiday gifts, whether it's to Afghans or to your own friends. The rice cookies are like butter cookies with pistachios on them, and they're really, really good. They're like one of the few things I actually bake. And then cardamom almond brittle is also super approachable, really fun, easy gift to give to other people. So
we've made the rice cookies. They're delicious. We've given them with welcome meals. Today I bought baklava because we were late. And here Julia is tasting the soup. So have I.
It's very good.
Delicious. Thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you're enjoying it.
Yes, it's wonderful. Someone asked what recipes you should try. Everything I've tried on Humaira's blog is delicious. My personal favorite is chicken lawang for meat, and the layered eggplant dish is out of this world. Do you know the one where you layer it and then you have a sauce on the top? What's the name of that?
It's a bonjon burani. Well, here's what you can do. When you go on my blog, I have a search field on the right. So you can just pop in, like, search eggplant, and all my eggplant dishes are gonna. So if you don't remember the Afghan name, it's okay. You can, or like, let's say you feel like chicken, just put in chicken and probably my chicken kebab and lawang will pop up. Also, for the bonjon burani, I have a video on YouTube as well.
Great.
I don't know, some people like following videos, some people like reading recipes. But yeah, those are some good and very approachable recipes.
We've tried so many. They've all been delicious. Those are just my personal favorites. The tomato, cucumber, cilantro, onion salad's amazing. And as we were cooking for Afghans, Africans, Salvadorans, we found that really every culture in the world, I think, has a tomato, cucumber, onion-based salad. That one's delicious. I would like to introduce people to the Welcome Dinner Project. So we do have our Zoom cooking on Mondays. We're so grateful Humaira could be here for the Afghan portion of that. But we do cook welcome dinners for refugees. KindWorks sets up apartments for refugees, and we also cook dinners for humanitarian organizations setting up apartments for refugees. Today it was Homeless Not Borders that I brought a meal to. What we do is traditionally in the past, we have cooked together. Right now it's vaccinated people. We've just started doing that. But you can also adopt a welcome dinner yourself, to get together with your friends or do it with your family and deliver it. What we do is we tuck that into the fridge, and our hope is we recognize that these families, they're refugees because they're leaving war, other kinds of danger. They're leaving the country they love, the country that they know. And what I try and think is, what would that be like coming into a country where I may not speak the language well or at all, bringing my children, uprooting my family? And what we hope is that for them to come and see that their new neighbors, their new country welcome them with a home that is set up with furniture, food in the refrigerator, pantry stocked, and a meal that's familiar to them will help ease the transitions so that they can rest with their family for a few days rather than feeling like they need to figure out how to feed their families. So we're trying to just send a little bit of message of care and welcome so that these families can rest because they've been through so much. So I hope that if you're interested, please join the Welcome Dinner Project. Join us on Mondays to Zoom cook. I am so thrilled to meet Humaira, who I only know through Facebook. If you ever come
Yes, we are liking each other's Facebook posts and such all the time. We just hadn't met.
yeah, so if I get out to San Francisco or you come out to DC, let's maybe cook a meal together. It would be really fun.
That would be really fun. I would love that. Thank you so much.
Humaira, I wanted to say hello as well. I'm Salma, the storyteller for Kind Works and the Chief Inspiration Officer. And it's such a pleasure to meet you. This was so much fun. I wanted to ask you one thing that I ask often to the chefs who cook with us, and that's about kindness in their particular culture, from their particular perspective in their country. Is there a way in which kindness is practiced that's unique to Afghan culture? I imagine it would be through food, but is there a particular word or a particular expression of kindness that's very unique to Afghan culture?
Yeah. Hi, Salma. It's nice to meet you. Well, one of the things that we use is an endearing word called John. So I would call you Salma John, and that's basically dear. So, and that's a word that shows familiarity and kindness. So I'd say, Salma John, it was really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. So I think that would be a kindness that would feel very like homey and just welcoming. The one way that Afghans show kindness, and this could be something that may be a culture shock, is that if they meet a child, they like kiss their cheek, like they kind of like lift their chin and give them kisses. And I think that I don't know, people will probably not do that right now with COVID. But if that happens, don't be alarmed or worried, because that is definitely something that's part of our culture. Like if you meet a child, you pick them up and give them a hug, and you pat them on the head. People are very, very kind and welcoming to children. So I'd say that's another way to show kindness too.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Any other last questions before we wrap up? Has anybody had a chance to taste this beautiful soup? We are excited to eat it. And I want to say, Humaira John, Olivier's many thumbs up, the highest praise. Humaira John, we are so grateful that you were here with us, and we wish you well in your work, and we will follow it, and let us know if there's anything else we can do.
Thank you, Dominique John. And I wish I could pick up Olivier and pinch his cheeks and give him kisses, but I'll send him virtual kisses. Thank you, everybody, for all you're doing for refugees. My family was a refugee. We were, helped by a local church here in San Jose, but we did not get the same kind of welcome you all are providing to the refugees, and know that that is going to make a world of difference. Like, we came to an empty house, and it took my parents a long time to, scrounge together furniture and lamps. Like, we had no idea that in California, none of the rooms had like overhead lights. You needed lamps, and lamps are so expensive. So I used to read and do my homework in a bathroom. So all that you're doing is really, really, really incredibly important. And it may not seem to you like it's that big of a deal, or maybe it does seem like a big deal, but I'm telling you, it's going to make those refugees feel really welcome. Their kids are going to feel safer and more at home. So thank you for all that you're doing.
And thank you for your recipes, because I think that tasting food that's familiar, you have given us the ability to do that. So we're really grateful.
Well, see, all these things, you know, you kind of start down a certain trajectory and then it affects people in so many different ways. Who would have thought that my recipes would be used to welcome Afghan immigrants? And I'm really happy that it's being done that way. So, but it's because you all are doing all this work, getting everybody together and sharing the recipes.
Well, you shared such great information with us. I want to remind everyone that it's all in the chat, and they can go down to the bottom of their chat box and hit those 3 little dots. And the first option under those 3 little dots is save the chat. So everybody, before you sign off, save your chat. Thank you for joining us. Humaira,
Olivier has his hand raised.
who does? Olivier? Yep.
Go ahead, hon.
I'm sending you kisses, and I'm also going to be sharing this soup with a neighbor who broke their arm.
Oh, wish your neighbor well. That is wonderful. And for everybody on the call, we'll be cooking next week with Kelly, who is cooking with us today. And I think Carol after that, but the week after that, Olivier and his sous chef, his mom, will be leading us. So Humaira, you might want to join us in a few weeks and see what Olivier is cooking up for us. Yeah.
Happy Halloween!
Happy
Halloween.
Happy upcoming Halloween!
Thank you, Humaira John. We appreciate it so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everyone.
So thank you for cooking with us.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.